Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Hello, friend, and welcome back to the conversation. Today we're going to talk about peak performance states. Now, this can be any state of mind that yields performance. It can be joy. It can be in the zone. It can be a happy, blissful state. It can be a focused, concentrated state. Now, most people are under the impression that these states of mind are given from circumstances, that we can't necessarily get there on purpose. Although, if you've been in sports for any length of time, you have this assumption that you can put on your game face, get your head in the game. But most athletes have a pre-game ritual in order to get themselves in such a state. Now, some of these rituals have been adopted over time and are somewhat superstitious. And what I mean by that is there's been some meaning attached to a circumstance, a practice, that they feel, that the athlete feels, that will lead them to a peak performance state or being in the zone. For instance, if they had a game one day that they just played like out of their mind, like they were unconscious, so to speak, they were in the zone. Everything was falling in. Everything was perfect. They couldn't do anything wrong. In order to recapture that event, maybe they ate a steak that day, or they took a nap, or they listened to music, a particular song. And so what happens is they tend to adopt the ritual that they had in place when they had the big event, when they had the day or the game where they played in the zone. And they try and recapture it. When I was younger, I did this same thing. Game day, I would take a nice leisurely bath. I listened to Elton John's Philadelphia Freedom, and I had a special meal, as well as a routine in getting dressed and getting ready. And more often than not, it did work. It didn't always work, but it wasn't until I studied NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, when I realized that these peak performance states can actually be programmed, triggered. Almost as if you install a button. You press the button and you set a whole cascade of events that results in a feeling state, typically a peak performance state. Now, most of you have been exposed to Psychology 101, where you've probably learned about Pavlov's dog, a conditioned response. This is a very similar idea. And if you don't remember Pavlov's experiment, he noticed one day when he was getting ready to feed his dog, the dog was anticipating getting fed. And so he naturally began salivating as Pavlov went through the routine that he did when he fed his dog. He noticed that the dog had been conditioned over time because the dog got fed the same time every day. And when Pavlov would go to the cupboard to get the food out at that time of day, the dog was anticipating getting fed. It had been conditioned that just reaching for the cupboard door meant that he was going to get food. And without the food even being in sight, the dog started to salivate in anticipation. He drooled. But Pavlov, being a behavioralist, wondered, since the dog had been conditioned that the cupboard door meant that food was behind it, could he pair an external stimulus that was not associated with food and get the same response? So Pavlov removed the dog from the familiar situation and then would ring a bell, then feed the dog. He paired the two events together. Ring a bell and feed the dog. Ring a bell and feed the dog. After a short period of time, all he had to do was ring the bell, and the dog began to salivate in anticipation of getting fed. If you have a pet, you know more than likely they are triggered by the can opener or by the rustling of the bag, or even just saying, "Are you ready to eat?" We have 3 cats, and each of them have a different anchor. You can just say, "Are you ready to eat?" to Binks, and he comes running. Then he's been trained to do a little twirl or a spin before he gets his food. And so that's part of his feeding routine. With Luna, we ring a bell. So she's the one that goes outside from time to time, and all I have to do is ring a bell, and she comes running. And then Gypsy, when I feed Gypsy, I make this sound, and she comes running. I used to use that sound with Albert, our white house bunny. For the most part, Albert hung out in his cage most of the day, and then in the evening, when we'd all settle down in front of the TV, we'd let Albert out. He would play with the cat. Sometimes he'd come up and sit on our chest. Sometimes he'd come up in my lap and let me pet him. He'd just kind of hang out with us. But when it was time to go back to his cage, time for us to go to bed, I would make that sound, and I'd go to the fridge, get out a little chunk of carrot, and walk back to the cage. He would come to the kitchen and watch me get the carrot out, and then run back to his cage. It was our routine. What most people don't realize, and you may not realize it, you've been anchored throughout your life. There are triggers in your environment, conversational triggers. Someone can look at you a particular way and trigger up a response. And you've probably said this in the past, they just know how to push my buttons. And then you've probably seen the warnings on certain movies and certain videos, trigger warning. The problem, though, is most of these triggers have been set in your psyche haphazardly by association. And to most of you may occur as if it's an issue, as if it's a problem. Like you don't want the trigger, you don't want to be triggered like that. But what NLP does, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, it's a model of how we run our brain. And so this is a profound learning event. You've paired a stimulus to an emotional response. From an NLP perspective, that is a profound learning event. And so if you could do it on purpose, wouldn't that be interesting? And it is. What I found interesting, though, over the years, that a lot of people will agree that they're triggered to the past. They have, certain triggers that bring up negative feelings, negative responses, anger, frustration, mopiness. They'll admit to those. They recognize those triggers, but they have difficulty with the idea that peak performance states can be triggered on demand. That you can go from feeling so-so to states of ecstasy or being excited or states of confidence, just like that. Because for most people, the idea of arriving at a feel-good state, it's given to them through external means, outside circumstances. Someone smiles at them or touches them a particular way, which causes a response. So if we're going to access a peak emotional state or any emotional state without the outside circumstances, how do we do that? Well, we can do that a couple of ways. First, let's remember a time, let's say confidence. Let's say we want to call up the feeling of confidence. Remember a time, there has to be at least one time where you felt supreme confidence. A lot of people get stumped by this, especially if they feel as if they don't have as much confidence as they could have. They have trouble finding that resource experience. But everybody has something that they're confident in. I remember in my Unleashed and Unstoppable workshop with the Firewalk experience, I had a guy named Jacob. And Jacob was sure that he had never felt confident in anything. And I made the same speech. There has to be some event somewhere in your life where you felt confident. He said, no, nothing, never. And I said, are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? He said, I'm absolutely sure I've never felt confident. And so I said, are you telling me there's no doubt in your mind that you've never felt confident? He said, I'm absolutely sure. I said, you're pretty confident you've never felt confident. That sense of certainty, that sense of surety, that is confidence. He looked at me rather dumbfounded and kind of shook his head no. And I said, think of me flying around the room. If I could flap my wings, could I fly around the room? And he shook his head no. And I said, so check inside your body. When I say that I can fly around the room, there's a feeling of doubt in you, correct? He goes, yeah, I'm pretty doubtful, yet sure that you can't fly. I said, remember that doubtful feeling. Now I want to check in your body as you answer this question. Can you tie your shoes? Yes. I said, what is that feeling like? Is it feeling, and I asked, is that feeling different than the doubt? Yes. What does it feel like? It feels certain. It feels heavy. It feels like solid. Doubt is kind of iffy, like a seesaw going back and forth. Okay, I want you to tune into that feeling of solidity as you think about tying your shoe and say, yes, I can. And you say it with tonality. You say, yes, I can, like with definiteness. Yes, I can. Then I said, stop for a moment, look out the window and look up at those clouds. That's a breaker state. Now I want you to say, yes, I can, and see what feeling comes up. And he said it, and he said, that feeling of I can. It really feels like I can when I say it. That feels like confidence. I told him I have another question to ask you. When you were first learning how to tie your shoes, did you take off immediately and know how to tie your shoes? Or did it take practice? He said it took practice. It took me a while. And then I said, now you've done it enough times where you feel a sense of certainty that you can certainly tie your shoe. There's that feeling of confidence there that you can tie your shoe. And so as you go out in the world in seemingly unknown situations, All you have to do is persist, and sooner or later you're going to have that feeling of certainty that you're going to get through this. And the more times you do something, the more familiar you are, the more certain you are, and the greater your level of confidence. Now, something he had divulged to me earlier is that he had doubt in himself in social situations. In fact, he had confided to me during the breaks of our workshop, he would avoid conversations because he felt uncomfortable. Well, I looked around the room, and in the audience was an attractive young woman. And I said, Jeanette, would you stand up? And I asked Jacob, is Jeanette someone you would typically have a conversation with? And he said, no way. I would just be too nervous. I said, perfect. Now I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I want you to say to me, yes, I can. Just like you did when tying your shoe. That feeling of certainty. Now, you've been up here talking to me for a little while now. Do you think we could continue the conversation? And then I pointed to him, and he said, yes, I can. I said, excellent. Now I want you to look at Jeanette, and do you think you could ask her a question that she might want to answer? Perhaps, what is her name? Or perhaps, what is her name? Where is she from? Is she enjoying the workshop? And then I touched him on the shoulder, and then he said, yes, I can. Do you think that after she answers one question, you could ask another question? And I tapped him on the shoulder, and he said, yes, I can. Continue to look at Jeanette and say, yes, I can. Feel that feeling of confidence as you look at her. She now becomes a source of confidence. What if you asked, are you enjoying the workshop? And she says, yes. What do you do then? Is there that awkward silence? What do you ask now? You could ask, so far, what's your favorite part about the workshop? Yes, I can. And so on and so forth. Later on the break, I noticed that Jacob had a conversation with Jeanette, and he was smiling. She was smiling. They were having a conversation. Didn't go beyond that, but it was a huge breakthrough. And that's what you want to do. You want to test it out in the real world. But even before you test it in the real world, you can just think about engaging in a conversation or engaging in a particular situation and check if the old familiar disempowering feeling shows up, or maybe something slightly better. If it has shifted at all, you know you're making progress. Now, if it doesn't feel like it has shifted, that's feedback. Double down and do it again. Expand the feeling and increase the intensity. Keep doing that until you notice a shift, notice a change. It will change. So what we're doing is we created a resource anchor, yes, I can, associated with that inner feeling of certainty. And then we started externalizing it, using that anchor, firing that anchor with new stimuli. So as he thought about a conversation with Jeanette, yes, I can. Now, some other things that I've said that trigger me for confidence is consider it done. Absolutely. I say it. Absolutely. Consider it done. It's already done in my mind. I first walked on fire in 1988. In 2004, I was certified as a firewalk instructor. Since that time, I've walked nearly 600 times across burning hot coals. I'm now anchored the moment I step up to the firewalk, the bed of coals. That final step is a trigger, an anchor for the state of walking on fire, for me being a firewalker. Now, earlier I said there's a couple ways to elicit this state, to elicit this resource state. I was leading another workshop, and Kathleen revealed to me that she had just gotten a divorce, and her ex was a narcissist, and over a series of years, she didn't even recognize herself because of the emotional abuse that she had gone through in that relationship. She said, I just want to recapture who I was 20 years ago. I was full of life. I was full of excitement. I was confident. I had the world by its tail. And I could see through her description of how she was recapturing all those feelings. And then in an instant, her state changed. And she says, but I've been in this relationship. And her whole tonality changed and all her physicality changed because of the story that she was telling. I clapped my hands and said, stop that. That's a breaker state, a pattern interrupt. And I held my hand up and said, look up here. Now I want you to remember how you were 20 years ago. Stand up right now. How did you stand when you were feeling confident, when you had the world by its tail? Show me how you stood. You could see her entire posture change in an instant. So that excitement for life, where did you feel that in your body? And she says, it was in my chest. How did you breathe when you were full of excitement and passion? She said, I could feel it in my chest. I was excited. And I told her, touch your chest, right over your heart, where you feel it. Tap right there, gently. And every time you tap it, that feeling of confidence, that feeling of excitement that you have the world by its tail, you're invigorated, you're full of life. Feel that feeling intensify every time you tap. And then just hold your fingers there, hold your hand there, and feel that feeling just vibrate in your body. You could see the tension in her face dissolve and disappear. She had a brightness about her, a glow in her face. And I said, that's how you felt 20 years ago, but you're feeling it right now. You have access to all those feelings. You're still the same person. That person is still inside. You just have to stop telling that old story. This is who you are now. And every time you touch your hand to your chest, you can feel all those feelings. I said, it's not going to take you 5 years to recapture this. You have access to it right now. So feeling as you're feeling right now, excited, full of life, you have the world by its tail. What's your next move? What are you going to do? She says, I'm going on vacation. I said, fantastic. Are you excited? She says, yes, I haven't felt like this in 20 years. I said, this is what you're feeling right now. This is the new Kathleen. I said, I want you to look off to your left and see your past relationship and then push that far off in the distance. And the further you push it out, the smaller and smaller it gets, the color's fading, and it disappears off in the distance. It is now behind you. This is your new story right now. She looked at me, amazed, bright-eyed, and said, you changed my life. I said, no. You changed your life. You did the work. You did the changing inside. You felt all those feelings. All those feelings are a part of you. It is who you are. And then I said to her, I just want to test. As you think about your past relationship, what comes up? She says, I feel like I put it behind me. Like it's over. Definitely over. I don't even recognize the person that was there. This is who I choose to be. Exactly. Now, what we did, if you notice when people get over stuff in life, they say things like, I just put that behind me. Or over time, it just kind of disappeared. It's no longer in the forefront of my mind. And so I had her put it off to the side and push it far off in the distance, putting it behind her. That's literally a process in our head, and we did it on purpose. You change how you represent your memories or how you represent your memories. You change the emotional content forever. And if you find that it pops up in an old familiar way, you can say, oh, that's the old story, and do the whole thing again, push it off in the distance. And you may have to do it a couple times, but more than likely, you just have to do it once, maybe twice. And the more dramatic and over the top you are, a lot of people like to blow it up or send it off into the sun. Now, with Kathleen, what we did is I didn't have her recall a specific event. What I had her call up are just the feelings. They were already there. You know what happiness feels like. You know what joy feels like. When you feel joy, where do you feel it in your body? Last week, I was talking to a client over Zoom. I'll call her Anna. And she was, when I asked her how things were going, she said, not so well. And she kind of had this story and was mopey. And she says, I just can't find my joy. I don't know where my joy is. I realized I haven't had access to my joy in a long, long time. And I replied, I'm curious, when you feel joy, where do you feel it? You feel it in your chest? And she said, yes. And she naturally put her hand there. I said, well, as you have your hand on your chest, feel that feeling of joy expand. How are you breathing when you feel joy? How does it feel in your body? It's not just in one part of your body, is it? It's like all over your body, is it not? She said yes, and she closed her eyes, and I said, feel all those feelings right now and have them vivify and expand into every part of your body. And you could see her entire face shift. And she started to cry. Tears of joy, tears of happiness. And she's like, I love myself. I realize I love myself. Of course you do. And I said, you didn't have to find your joy. Your joy's been there all along. You've just been blocking it. You've been blocking it with that old story. But when you tune into it, when you focus into it, it's all you can feel. And then she opened her eyes and said to me, oh, I just understood. You say that we already have all the resources we need inside. That's what you were talking about. I said, yes, it is. We have felt just about everything at one point or another. We don't need those external circumstances or events to call up these feelings. We can just tune into them and ask ourselves, when I feel that, where in my body do I feel it? How do I stand? How do I breathe? Breathing is very important because our breathing typically supports the emotional state that we're in. And so you don't need these external events. You can call up any feeling, create a resource for yourself in this moment. You don't need to spend 5 years. And what's interesting with Anna is just before that, she was feeling somewhat depressed. She was almost going to cry out of sadness rather than happiness. The mood that she presented was heavy and oppressive. She was telling herself a certain story. She had been acclimating to that, and she was thinking that's how she was. She did not have access to joy, and she kept pushing it away. She was resisting joy because she didn't feel like she deserved it, didn't have a reason to feel joy. Well, let's just feel joy. Let's be unreasonable. I'm going to feel joy for no good reason. Now, I asked her to practice this on a daily basis. Step into this feeling of joy on command. Step into this feeling of joy on purpose, intentionally, deliberately. When you hold your hand to your chest, you can feel that joy. You can smile to yourself and say, I love myself. I really, really love myself. Then, like I did with Jacob, she can then think about other events, meeting different people, going into different circumstances, and she can be there with joy. She doesn't have to be afraid of other people. She doesn't have to play down her vitality in order to fit into somebody else's idea of who she should be. She can show up with vibrancy, with joy, with excitement, with love, just because of who she is. And just like I had Jacob look at Jeanette and say, yes, I can, she can look at these different situations and say, I love myself. I am filled with joy. I am in joy. While she's imagining she's in the company of these other people that used to make her feel funky, in joy, in confidence. I love myself. I have nothing to prove to you. I am whole and complete just as I am. Imperfectly perfect. Now, I want to talk quickly about the anchors, and I'm not going to go in depth in this, but you want to pair some physical cue with this internal response. With Jacob, it was the words, yes, I can. And it had a specific tonality and a specific cadence that called up those feelings. That cadence and tonality was the anchor. You can just say, yes, I can, and it's not the same. Yes, I can. For myself, I could say, consider it done. No, I say, consider it done. Absolutely. It's already in my mind. It's already done. See, there's a tonality. There's a sense of certainty that's there. With Anna, it's I love myself. It's that tone. I love myself. It was such exuberance that she had there. I love myself. And then her touching her chest. She put her hand over her heart. That's an anchor. That's a trigger. Now she can do that again and call up all those feelings. For me at the firewalk, it's that last step. That's very deliberate as I take that last step up to the firebed just before I walk. And then I focused on the other end. I take a deep breath and I lean in. I wait for the inner signal. And as soon as I feel it, I take the first step. I don't think about it. It's all automatic. It's all part of a process. With Kathleen, it's tapping on her chest with her fingertips right over her breastbone. And she gave me the trigger phrase. I got the world by the tail. There was a certain energy behind that. I got the world by the tail. So saying it a particular way, in the same way every time. Now, you can also use songs as an anchor. You're already anchored to songs. You can hear a song from your childhood, from your high school years, and you are transported back in time. All those feelings you are feeling then, you feel when you hear that song again. Smells, odors, fragrances are excellent triggers because it works right with the reptilian brain. The olfactory sense is our most primitive sense. So you can use essential oils to associate to different states of mind. I have different places I tap on my body. I can hold emotions in my fist, confidence in my fist. Right now I'm making a fist. Now I've stacked emotional states in my fist. Joy, laughter, humor, confidence, certainty, resilience, like being unstoppable, are all in my fist. I can make a fist and it changes my state almost immediately. Something else I've done is I've loved roller coasters. I've practiced raising my hands above my head, which I sit in the front seat, and I love that first drop. When you first just go over the edge and you hang there, I put my hands up, and right now I'm doing it, and I'm getting excited all over again. And then as I'm going down, it's yes, yes, yes. Woo! Right now, I'm totally charged inside my body, as if I just rode a roller coaster. If you want to learn how to do this on your own, you can take advantage of my NLP course, my Neuro-Linguistic Programming course, inside the Nexus of Transformation, my online membership. To learn more, go to yesdaniel.com. If you don't see anything specifically there, email me at support@danov.com for more information. I'm here to assist you in learning how to run your brain, to master your mind. Until next time, this is your friend and host, Daniel Danovi, urging you to follow your bliss. Live your life from inner signals. Be inner directed as you engage in the epic adventure.